The year is 1470. High in the mountains of Thessal, a convent bell rings out across a quiet valley. One last time. The sound is thin in the cold air, but it carries. It always has. Inside the convent of St. Catherine, 23 women kneel shoulder to shoulder, heads bowed, lips moving together through the same morning prayer they've spoken for years. But today the words feel different in their mouths. Heavy, bitter, like ash, like a farewell they never meant to say out loud. Outside those thick stone walls, the horizon isn't glowing with sunrise. It's stained red by banners, Ottoman banners. The army doesn't march toward the convent like a line of men. It rolls forward like a tide. Steel, fire, and certainty, engulfing villages, swallowing kingdoms, leaving nothing behind but silence. At the front of the chapel stands Sister Ilani, the abbess. She grips a silver crucifix that has survived 3 generations of nuns before her. Her hands shake, but not from fear. It's something colder than fear. Recognition. She knows what's coming. They all do. What they don't know, what no one alive could have imagined, is that death would have been a kindness. Because what happens next isn't the kind of conquest you read about in school books. It wasn't debated in grand halls or carved into proud monuments. It was buried, erased, hidden under centuries of deliberate forgetting. What the Ottomans did to these women wasn't just war. It was something more careful, more calculated. Something historians are only now starting to piece together from scattered records and stains of testimony. The question isn't whether you can handle the truth. The real question is whether you're willing to remember it. If you've ever wondered why some stories survive while others vanish, why some tragedies become legends and others are swallowed whole, you're in the right place. Here on Crimson Historians, we go digging where the world stopped looking. Missionary letters, Ottoman state ledgers, faded testimonies locked away in Vatican vaults. Every view, every like, every subscription helps drag another voice out of the dark. So let's go back to that convent. The bell has fallen silent. The doors are about to splinter. To understand what happened to those nuns, you first have to understand the machine that was closing around them. 17 years earlier, in 1453, Constantinople fell. The jewel of Christendom, an empire's heart that had beat for more than 1,000 years, gone in 53 days of cannon fire and blood. The Hagia Sophia, once the greatest cathedral on earth, was stripped of its crosses within hours. Its mosaics were plastered over. Its bells melted down. Within a week, the call to prayer echoed under domes that had held hymns for 9 centuries. Sultan Mehmed II walked into that ancient church and declared it a mosque. Not because he needed another place to worship. He already had plenty. He did it because he understood what most conquerors don't. You don't defeat a people by killing them. You defeat them by erasing who they are. The Ottomans didn't just take land. They took identity. When Mehmed looked west at the scattered remnants of the Byzantine world, he saw stubborn wounds that refused to close. Every bell that still rang, every monastery that still stood, every cross that threw its shape across conquered ground. Those weren't harmless relics. They were declarations, proof that the old world wasn't fully dead, and every nun still praying in Latin was a living reminder that faith could outlast armies. So the Sultan made a decision. If they would not convert, they would disappear. Not through massacre. Massacre makes martyrs. Martyrs breed resistance. Songs are written. Stories are told. The dead become immortal. The Ottomans had perfected something quieter, something elegant in its cruelty, A method that left no ballads, no saints, no memory. Erasia. By 1470, this strategy had already been tested across the empire. Greek monasteries in Morea, Serbian convents in the Balkans, Armenian churches in Anatolia. They didn't always burn them. Sometimes they converted them. Sometimes they abandoned them. But the rhythm was the same every time. First came the offer, then came the silence. The convent of St. Catherine sat on a hillside in Thessal, far from any fortress or ally. A lonely place, a perfect test case, another small stone in the path of a growing empire. But the women inside didn't know they were about to become a footnote. They weren't warriors. They were women who had spent their lives in prayer and quiet labor. Their weapons were rosaries. Their armor was faith. Most of them had never even seen a soldier up close, never held a blade, never imagined that one day they might need to. Sister Alani had led this convent for 12 years. Before taking her vows, she cared for the sick in a village that no longer exists, lost to plague in 1448. She didn't come here to hide from the world. She came to understand it. Sister Magdalena was 19, still young enough to flinch at loud noises. She had taken her vows only 2 years earlier, her hands rough with the last calluses of her father's farm. She joined after her family was killed in a raid. The convent was the only place she'd felt safe since. Sister Theodorus was 70. She had outlived 2 abbesses, an emperor, and more wars than she could count. Death didn't scare her. She'd made peace with it decades ago. But none of them had ever faced this. If this part of history doesn't stir something in you, you might be missing the lesson our ancestors bled to teach. Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do in the face of power is refuse to forget who you are. So now, watch what happens when faith meets empire. The first cannonball strikes just after dawn. It doesn't hit the chapel, it hits the bell tower. The sound is like the sky cracking open. Stone bursts outward. Iron screams against iron. The bell that had called them to prayer for 140 years shatters mid-swing, raining jagged pieces into the courtyard where the sisters grew herbs for healing. The same hands that tended those plants now fly to cover their ears. Sister Alani doesn't scream. She steps forward, raises her crucifix high, and starts to sing. Kyrie eleison, Lord, have mercy. One by one, the others join her, 23 voices rising into smoke and rubble. But empires don't listen to songs. By midday, the gates are breached. Ottoman soldiers spill into the courtyard, not with swords drawn, with ledgers, quills, ink. They walk through the convent like clerks, not conquerors, counting, recording, cataloging, because in their eyes, these women aren't people, they're assets. A translator steps forward, a Greek man from these hills. His voice trembles as he reads from a scroll, shame packed into every word. By order of Sultan Mehmed II, all subjects of conquered territories must submit to the authority of the sublime. Those who convert will be granted protection. Those who refuse will face the consequences of rebellion. Sister Alani steps out, calm as still water. She doesn't speak to the soldiers. She speaks to the translator in clear Greek that everyone understands. Tell your sultan we already gave our lives to a king. We have nothing left to surrender. The officer in charge, Hassan Pasha, a name that appears in Ottoman records from the Thessalian campaign, doesn't respond with fury. He smiles, because he knows something they don't yet understand. The Ottomans had become masters at breaking people without killing them. That night, the women are locked inside their own chapel. No food, no water, only darkness, and the sounds of soldiers outside, laughing, eating, living, as they wait to see who cracks first. Two young sisters from Corinth begin to sob in the corner. Their fear bounces off the stone walls. Then Sister Magdalena, barely 20, starts whispering a psalm. "The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want." Another breath. "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil." Then another. Slowly the crying stops. The chapel fills with quiet prayer instead. This was the moment the Ottomans misread them. These women had spent their lives preparing for suffering, fasts, cold vigils, hours of silence, submission to something greater. What the soldiers thought of as torture was, for the nuns, daily discipline. But Hassan Pasha is patient. He has seen this before, in Maria, in Wakia, in ruined Serbian monasteries where monks believed faith alone would save them. "Faith is like a candle," he wrote once to the Sultan. "It burns brightest just before it dies." Now he intends to prove it. On the second day, the chapel doors groan open. A servant slips inside carrying bread and a clay jug of water. Real bread, clean water. He sets them down in the middle of the floor like an offering and leaves without a word. The smell hits them like a memory. Their throats are raw. Their stomachs feel hollowed out. A few of the younger sisters stare at the food as if it might be a miracle. Their eyes lift toward Sister Alani, pleading without speaking. Before Alani can answer, Sister Theodoros, the oldest among them, clears her cracked lips. "They want us to take it," she says softly, "to feel grateful, to soften." Alani nods once. Then we fast. No one moves. The bread sits untouched. The water sweats in its jug, glinting in the dim light. Minutes pass. Hours. The temptation is almost crueler than hunger. By the third day, their lips are split and bleeding. Hands shake when they clasp rosaries. A few sisters can barely stand without leaning against the wall. But still, no one gives in. No one speaks the words Hassan wants to hear. Hassan Pasha watches from the courtyard, arms folded. He looks impressed, annoyed, and for one flickering moment, something close to respect crosses his face. But respect doesn't change the plan. That afternoon, the doors open again. This time, it's not a servant. It's Hassan himself. He steps into the chapel like he owns the air inside it. The translator trails him, pale and silent. Hassan speaks in Turkish, slow and even. The translator follows, repeating each sentence in Greek like a shadow. "You are not criminals. You are not enemies. You are simply mistaken. The Sultan is merciful." He gestures to the bread and water. "He offers you new lives, new names, protection. All you must do is speak the words." Silence. The only sound is faint breathing and the soft scrape of a chain outside. Hassan keeps going. "Or you may come with us to Constantinople. There the Sultan himself will hear your case. Perhaps he will be moved by your conviction." He pauses, letting that hang in the air like a candle flame. "But the road is long," he adds, almost kindly, "and the weak do not survive it." It isn't phrased like a threat. It's phrased like fact. Sister Alani looks over her sisters. Some are kneeling with eyes shut, whispering prayers through dry mouths. Some are slumped against the wall, trying to stay conscious. Some stare at the floor as if they're pulling strength from the stone. She turns back to Hassan. "We will walk." The smile returns to his face. Not warm, not human, just satisfied. "Good," he says. "We leave at dawn." That night, the women huddle together in the darkness. No one has the strength for speeches. No one needs them. Their choice was made long ago. Then Sister Magdalena begins to hum, barely louder than a breath. A hymn from Vespers, one they've sung 100 times. One by one, the others join her. A thin chorus rises into the night, seeping through the chapel cracks. Outside, soldiers hear it. A few of them pause mid-laugh. One man turns his face away as if the sound burns. Years from now, one of those soldiers will tell his grandson about the women who sang themselves into the jaws of empire. And even that story will be forgotten. But for now, the hymn drifts into the cold air like a last declaration. We are still here. They leave at dawn on the 4th day. 23 women in a single line, hands bound with rope, walking south toward the coast. No carts, no horses, just feet on dust, sun on shoulders, and a road that doesn't care who you are. The soldiers don't rush them. They don't need to. The road itself is the punishment. By the 2nd day, Sister Irene collapses. She's 62, her knees failing for years even before this march. She tries to push herself up. Her legs refuse. The soldiers don't stop. They barely glance back. Sister Magdalena and Sister Anna rush to her, sliding their shoulders under her arms. Together, they lift her and carry her, step by step, for 3 more miles. When they finally camp for the night, Irene is unconscious. By morning, she's gone. The sisters kneel by the roadside and dig her grave with their bound hands. No shovels, no ceremony. Only dirt under fingernails and whispered prayers into the wind. The soldiers watch. They don't interfere. Hassan Pasha simply opens his ledger and scratches a mark. 22 remaining. On the 4th day, it happens again. Sister Callista, silent since the siege, stops in the middle of the road. No stumble, no cry. She just sits down, closes her eyes, and doesn't rise. The sisters call her name once, twice. She doesn't answer. The soldiers tug at her rope. She stays still. In the end, they leave her there. By the time the column reaches the port of Volos 7 days later, only 18 remain. But something else happens on that road. Something the Ottomans didn't anticipate. The nuns stop weeping, stop pleading, stop looking for mercy where none will come. They walk in silence. But it isn't the silence of defeat. It's the silence of women who have already crossed the line inside themselves. Women who know exactly who they are, even with rope on their wrists. Sister Ilani walks at the front, leading them even in chains. On the morning of the 7th day, Hassan Pasha calls for her. She's brought to his tent alone. What happens inside isn't written in Ottoman records. It survives in a different place, in a letter by a Venetian merchant who witnessed what came after. A letter found in 2003 in the archives of Drovnik. He writes that at dawn, they brought Ilani back draped in silk, that she couldn't walk, that her eyes were open but empty, as if she had been pushed somewhere deep inside herself and locked there. They paraded her through the camp as a convert. But when the merchant passed close, he saw her lips moving. She was still praying in Latin, silently. They hadn't broken her faith. They'd taken her body and left her soul wandering. This is the part of Erasia history doesn't teach. The Ottomans didn't want martyrs. Martyrs become legends. They wanted ghosts. Women who would breathe and obey and serve, but never again be whole. Living proof that resistance was useless. Living warnings to anyone who thought faith could stand against empire. Sister Ilani walks with them the rest of the way to the coast, but she never speaks again, never meets anyone's eyes. She is there, and she isn't. The younger sisters cry when they see her. The older ones pray harder. At the port of Volos, the survivors are loaded onto a galley, a warship built for control, rows of benches, chains bolted to wood. This isn't a vessel for passengers, it's for cargo. Slaves, prisoners, captives. The nuns are chained to the benches, wrists locked into iron rings. A ship's manifest found in 1987 in Istanbul's Topkapi Palace Museum lists them not by name, but by number. Religious captives, female, 18. Destination, imperial household. Purpose, domestic service and conversion. That word service is doing a lot of work. The voyage lasts 12 days. The sea shows them no mercy. Storms whip the deck. Salt spray stings their broken lips. The ship pitches hard enough to yank chains tight. The women who have never seen the ocean vomit until there's nothing left. At night, Sister Magdalena whispers psalms beneath her breath. Her voice is barely more than air, drowned by waves. But other prisoners chained nearby, Greeks, Serbs, Italians, men and women alike, turn their heads to listen. For a moment, in the darkness and the roar, the sea feels almost still. When the ship finally enters the Bosphorus, the sisters see Constantinople rise ahead. Domes, minarets, walls stretching like a horizon of stone. The city gleams in dawn light like a blade. For centuries, it had been the city, the world's desire. Now it will become their cage. From the docks, they're marched through narrow streets packed with merchants, soldiers, and chained captives. People stop to stare. Even in an empire built on conquest, Christian nuns among the prisoners are rare. Their veils are torn, their faces hollow with salt and hunger, but they walk upright anyway. They're led past ancient walls, through the imperial district, past gardens where fountains sing and peacocks scream. Then, beneath the shadow of the Hagia Sophia, the great church now turned mosque, they're forced to stop, to kneel. The call to prayer rolls down from the minarets like a net thrown over the city. One sister whispers, her voice barely there, "We are home, but it is no longer ours." They expect to be taken into grand halls, into courtyards where ambassadors bargain and vassals conspire. Instead, they are driven down stone steps that spiral into darkness, past damp tunnels that smell of earth and decay, past doors that aren't marked on any map, to a place that doesn't officially exist. If you're still here, it's because some part of you knows this story shouldn't stay buried. Subscribe to Wounds of History, not for us, but for them, for the voices that were swallowed by silence. Now, follow them into the dark. Beneath Topkapi Palace runs a web of tunnels tourists never see. Storage vaults, servant passages, forgotten corridors winding through bedrock like veins. And deep in the farthest corner, sealed behind a false wall, a room with no recorded purpose. In 2011, during restoration work, archaeologists broke through that wall. What they found stopped them cold. Scratched into stone, faint at first, then everywhere, were crosses. Dozens of them. Small, crude, carved with fingernails or shards of broken pottery. And beneath those crosses, etched in Latin, 4 words. Lux in tenebris lucet. The light shines in the darkness. This was their chapel. For months, maybe years, those women lived beneath the palace as silent servants by day, scrubbing floors, washing linens, tending fires for rooms they would never enter. They moved through the world above them like shadows, spoken to only in commands, counted only when missing. But at night, when the palace slept, they gathered here. No priest, no altar, no Bible, only memory. They recited psalms by heart, verses half forgotten, reshaped into prayers that kept them breathing. They sang hymns in whispers so soft, the stone barely caught them. They stole bread from kitchens and water from wells for communion. And they carved their faith into the wall, one scratch at a time, knowing no one was supposed to ever see it. Sister Magdalena was among them, the girl who had whispered psalms on the ship, who had lifted Sister Irene on the road, who had refused to look away when they paraded Sister Alani in silk. In the darkness, she became their voice. The archaeologists found her mark too, a small bird scratched into a corner. Beside it, 23 thin lines, one for each sister. Only 11 lines were complete. The rest trailed off into nothing. They used broken pottery for candle holders, a scrap of linen for an altar cloth. From a sliver of shattered mirror, they fashioned a crude cross. In that secret room, they gathered each night after the palace fell quiet. No sermons, no speeches, only whispers. Each woman shared a memory. Her village, her church bell, the smell of bread before dawn, the warmth of a mother's hand. Those memories became their new psalms, small offerings to a God who still listened in the dark. A Venetian prisoner held for ransom in 1478 wrote about strange voices beneath the harem, women singing in Latin to a God not of this empire. For centuries, historians dismissed it as superstition, until the chapel was found. But here's what breaks your heart. Halfway across the wall, the crosses stop, not cleanly, not neatly. The scratches become erratic, desperate, lines gouged deeper, as if carved with more force, more urgency than nothing. Ottoman records from 1482 mention a cleansing of palace staff under the new sultan. Anyone deemed unproductive or resistant was removed. No names, no burial sites, no detail. Just a single line in neat Ottoman script, disposed. The nuns of St. Catherine vanish from history. 18 women who walked 7 days through hell, crossed the sea in chains, carved prayers into stone in a room no one acknowledged. Gone. But the chapel remained. A French diplomat visiting in 1712 recorded a rumor among older palace servants that on certain nights in the lower halls, the air would turn cold, and if you listened, you could hear women singing in Latin. He laughed it off as superstition. But walls don't invent stories. When archaeologists examined the chapel more closely, they found traces of wax, not from Ottoman candles, but from older convent-style candles, mixed with herbs, the kind nuns used for vigil lights, which means they lasted longer than anyone guessed. Months, maybe years, night after night, refusing to disappear. Sister Magdalena's bird was the final mark on the wall, and beside it, scratched so faintly it almost isn't there. 2 words in Greek. We endure. And they did. But they did more than endure. They left behind something empires can't erase. A room full of crosses, a prayer in stone. Proof that faith can survive where chains and decrees can't. The Ottoman Empire lasted until 1922. 600 years of power, conquest, and reinvention. It spanned 3 continents. It rewrote maps, languages, cultures. It turned the greatest cathedral of Christendom into a mosque. It ruled from the gates of Vienna to the deserts of Arabia. But it couldn't erase 18 women with nothing but fingernails and belief. Think about that. An empire with cannons and armies and endless resources against women in darkness, scratching hope into rock. The women didn't reclaim their convent. They didn't live to see freedom. They didn't win in the way empires measure victory. But they left a mark. History may be written by victors, but memory is written by survivors. And sometimes survival looks like a cross carved in a hidden room, a hymn whispered in a forbidden language, a bird scratched into stone for sisters who fell along the way. Centuries later, we found it anyway. The philosopher Saurin Kagard once wrote, "Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards." These women lived forward into darkness. They walked 7 days, knowing they might die. They crossed the sea in chains, knowing what waited. They descended into tunnels beneath a palace, knowing sunlight might never touch them again. And they carved prayers anyway, trusting that one day someone would look backward and find them. You just did. So why does this story matter? Not because it's about religion, not even because it's about the Ottomans. It matters because it shows what power does when it tries to erase people, and what happens when those people refuse to vanish. Lux in tenebris lucet. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it.